Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We return replenished and no doubt complete. And as I said before, we start with our presentations. And no doubt, the words of my colleague ringing in your ears about your time and what you can and cannot do. I have Mr. Peter Thompson before us to begin the first presentation. Mr. Thompson, at your leisure, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Thompson. I'm a resident of Blythe. It's a small English village to the north of the county. I noticed in the application that was put forward that the photographs of Blythe, of which there are a few, don't show any vehicles. So I thought I'd photograph Blythe with a few vehicles, or as little as vehicles as I could possibly find. So I picked a day. You can see the memorial there, which is the War Memorial in our village hall. In the background is our church, which is dated from 1088 and one of the oldest in the country. I picked a day when there was very little traffic about, I hope. That's the road past the school. Another view of the road past the school with very little traffic on. And the same there. That's where the site is, and you can see the traffic will go up into Blythe and then turn right at the mini islands, either onto the A1 or south onto the A1 to the left. Those photographs we've just seen were actually taken on Christmas morning this year. 2 or 3 weeks later, I took what I thought was an average day. That's the entrance to the site, and you can start seeing the traffic. Those are the 2 mini roundabouts. When somebody talked about a conservation area, you are looking at it. This is the traffic entering those mini roundabouts. Sorry, that's one of your own vehicles. And sorry about the lighting here, but you can see that generally speaking, there is considerable HGV traffic coming through a so-called conservation area. And of course, past the school. We have a primary school just down there, where you see 2 lorries actually going. More lorries trying to negotiate the 2 mini islands. That gives you a vision, which I think somebody mentioned when you did your site visit. You must have seen some of these lorries. You can't have missed them because this was January and it was a low traffic day. I mean, currently it's much busier. That's a nice one, going around the mini islands. So we think there is we know there's a cumulative knock-on effect with the increase in HGV traffic. And it's our parish council's opinion that these problems will become severe to the detriment of the residents. We noticed that the traffic figures used in the application are 2015. There's been several major developments approved in 2016-17. And we have, to the north, slightly to the north of the village, so-called Harworth Industrial Development, actually the parish of Stirrup, bordering on Blythe, and that's to the north of the village, which could happen in the next 3-4 years, but could start as early as next year. There is an A1 hub at to the north of the village, actually in Blythe, and that was approved March this year, in other words, this month. In that fast food chain, with a coach repair set up, and I haven't seen the full details yet. As he mentioned, there are quarries at Barmy Moor and Botany Bay, and I don't need to go into those anymore. Slightly to the north, west of us, there is a Thievesdale Lane residential industrial development in Worksop. The traffic from there, to reach the A1, has to come down through Blythe and enter the A1 via the village. And that, again, will be in the same sort of time scale as what we're talking about from Tinker Lane. We also think there is just a possibility, from what we've heard, sorry this is off the slide, that entering traffic from the A1, if the traffic from Miston Springs has to turn left instead of turning right, which they haven't got 106 agreement in place yet, it could come through Bawtry and it enters the A1 at Blythe. The vehicle movements from Tinker Lane sorry, that should say a 4-month period, but it's immaterial. The total comes to, for this application, an increase of 17,500 vehicles. They're slightly underestimated because there is an arithmetic error in the original application. Also in the application on HGV movement, there's some conditions about traffic past the school. In fact, it's proposed there's no HGV movement between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4:15. However, there's a breakfast club starting this Easter, and that hours are 7:40 to 8:40, so already it's out of date. There's after-school activity currently 3 times a week with a 4:30 finish. And there's a preschool on the High Street, that Memorial Hall that you saw. No account is taken of that, and that is active 5 mornings a week and well attended. It's not only our opinion that says that. I'll read this out in case anybody can't say it. Future traffic growth will result in a significant numbers of vehicles queuing back along the High Street to the point where they'll block the Redford Road mini roundabout junction and beyond. This will severely restrict the movement of traffic within Blythe. That's from your own Highway Development Control, July 2016. Well, different to what is actually being said now. And it relates to the advice that you were asked for the Thiefdale Lane application. We note that there is existing mine work close to, and whilst this is not for fracking, there is a proposal to carry out mini hydraulic fractures, which in the industry called mini frac. Because of those undergoing, because of those potential explosions there, we think that you shouldn't do any pressure tests whatsoever until at least you've carried out a 3-day survey, 3D survey, seismic survey, which seems to be industry standard practice for this type of depth of drilling. We are concerned over the financial viability of the applicant. There's various rumours going around in the city about changes in ownership, etc. Don't seem to be doing anything about it. 14 months ago, the share value was £1.40. When I wrote this, which is Friday, it was 6.5p. This morning, it's 4.65p. So it seems to me that financial institutions do not have the confidence that other people seem to have. And we would like to see guarantees and bonds which actually took care of the aftercare. Because if something goes wrong, we need something there. It seems to me as the risk is so low, as claimed by the applicant, it shouldn't be very expensive to get an insurance policy to cover that risk. A resident survey in Blythe suggested 90% against the development. But that was a door-to-door survey, and I think fairly accurate. On Saturday this week, I was in Blythe with my wife, and there was a stall from Nottinghamshire against fracking, I think it was. So we went up, and I joined them for about an hour. They queued to sign a letter and the petition. Now, I've manned stalls in Retford High Street for the EU referendum, also for the alternative vote referendum, and also for charities. I have never seen such an anxiousness to participate against the development. So I think the local community is there. The applicant has really blatantly disregarded the planning rules by erecting those temporary buildings at Tinker Lane. And also we have concerns that when it was drilling at Danger Lakes, it contravened several of the planning conditions. The past 14 months, I've served on the community liaison group, and which in parts has been very good. I now feel as I've learned a lot about drilling. In fact, I think I could probably drill But I have grave doubts, and I think it should be noted there are 4 members of that committee, including the chair, here today, making presentations, and we're all in opposition. I don't think that what's happened so far is a very good start to win the local community's trust. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Thompson. This is the point that members can ask our speaker. Councillor Hector.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation, and your obvious love for your village. Earlier on, I asked a question about the impact of the traffic on Blythe Village, and I obtained some assurances from the officers opposite that they've taken everything into account when it came to looking at the impact of this development and other developments in the area. But you seem to be pointed out in your presentation that you believe that their figures are based upon old data. I think you refer to dated data. Can you expand on that at all?
I noticed in the application that the traffic figures were 2015, and we're now looking at 2017. We're aware as a council, regardless of this application, of the massive increase in traffic through the village, and it's a concern of practically every resident in the village, because Harworth South, this is just affecting us, Harworth South, the plans for Mandalay and the Thiefdale Lane development, without other housing developments which we know are happening in the area. Being a conservation village, we have the oldest church in the UK, or one of them, 1088 it was built. We do have a vast concern. All the traffic, especially the Thiefdale Lane, goes past the school and goes past the preschool. And then, when you look at the advice given to Bassingthorpe District Council by this council in July this year, which I have with me, they are suggesting that unless something is done, and their suggestion was not acceptable to the parish council to be built in an island in the middle of the village green, we would have severe traffic problems, and we think they're already severe. I live on one of the main roads, and I can tell you it's severe. And so, yes, I'm questioning some of the assumptions, I suppose, that have been made by the current comments that are in this.
Thank you very much.
If I may interject purely on the fact that you've referred to that document there and a comment that I understand went up on the screen from one of our own officers. Can you put that comment in the context in which it was in before? How did that emerge?
And this is you were asked, which I presume is routine, to comment on the Thiefdale Lane development, and there is quite a considerable document about the road network, and that is the comment that your engineer, I presume, made about the traffic in Blythe. Within that context, he's saying that really you will need to do some development to the road network from the road that works up into Blythe, because otherwise it's going to jam up. I think his timescale was 2020, maybe 2022. It's in a relatively short timescale, and one of the proposals he put forward or suggested was that the village green had a traffic island on it, which would be the parish council would object to, own the village green, because it's common land, and would need to go to Parliament, I presume, to enact. So what I'm saying is that there's that comment from July last year, which doesn't seem to match with what I've heard today or read in the application.
And on that point, Mr. Thompson, while your point is powerfully made, and I know we discussed the notion of temporary and permanent to almost a metaphysical point earlier on, but given the fact that the argument that was put this morning, that this, by whatever definition, is a temporary development, put that temporary development within the context of what you're concerned about.
Yes, I mean, the intensive period we think would be about a 7-week period, probably, where things would be unbearable. But the point is that it's additional to what's already happening, and it comes past the primary school, where the refuge is there. I think there's one of my colleagues will tell you on their presentation, there's something like 8 inches between the curb and heavy lorries. And then they have to hit 2 mini roundabouts, which is my slide, you see. It's not about necessarily the quantity, but there's a difficulty in actually getting around those mini roundabouts. Now, they have improved the traffic flows through barbed wires as they were put in 2 years ago, but it is still a great difficulty. And to put any extra HGVs, especially with other developments we know are happening, seems to us to be crazy.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Zadowski.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Thompson, for your presentation. I've got 2 quick questions. One is that you are one of the members of the Community Liaison Group, and you say that it's led to a lack of trust. Now, I just wonder if you could elaborate on that, what's breaking down in that relationship or not being as forthcoming. And the second one is about this traffic time around schools and the restrictions. Would you, as the parish council or as a resident, have an alternative recommendation that this committee might want to make about traffic movement times, if that made it more easy around altering our condition to protect the school times?
As far as the primary school goes, to answer that part of the question first, I think they should at the very least be extended to take into account the increased time in the morning for the breakfast club and for the activities on after school before 4:30. But what is also worrying us is that we have applied the Memorial Hall, which is a war memorial hall, a superb building theatre, but that is used by a preschool, which is well attended and used 5 mornings a week. Now, I'm a trustee on there, and I'm well aware of the dangers that people have either parking or walking across. Trying to cross the road can sometimes be a nightmare. And there is no consideration at all for that part of the school. And I think that needs a study to determine how that could be alleviated. So I don't have a ready answer that I can give you, but it needs to be looked at. The other part of your question was the community liaison group. Well, we do have the chair here, and perhaps you can also ask the question of her. But in my experience, whilst we altered the terms of reference when we very first started so that it belonged to the people rather than Dwight Gas, which operated it, and parts of it has been very useful because I have found a lot about drilling and the profession many years ago over mortality, so finding out about drilling has been quite useful for me. But things like the erection of the temporary cabins, there was a dispute in that, and a meeting was arranged by for the Environment Agency to come talk to us, and one of my colleagues invited a couple of people from the liaison group at Mr Springs. IGAS reported that to Environment Agency. Now you're talking about an audience of 6 to 8. The meeting was cancelled because they were saying it was made up to the public. In actual fact, you must have gone up the tree to the Environment Agency because about 2 days later they said, oh no, we got that wrong, we'll have it. And we said, well, talk, we're all about too busy. So we never had the meeting with the Environment Agency. And as a result, the thing has fallen into disrepute, if you like. There's been lots of little measures like that which make us question. And you know, this is a committee which is supposed to get the community well involved. For instance, IGAS put a full-scale exhibition on in the Memorial Hall, which we promoted for them. Unfortunately, not many people turned up, but it was there, and we've encouraged that. It just has not worked. And my experience on Saturday says that it reinforced my opinion that the community is well and truly against this.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Yes, a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. It was very helpful to get that local insight to the photographs. One of the slides you showed was of, I think it was an advisory 20-mile-an-hour sign.
Yes.
the report talks about an interactive sign to control traffic as well. Maybe I was going to ask this of the officers, but maybe you can help with your own local knowledge as to what the methods specifically are for controlling the speed of traffic.
There is, at the moment, there is a 20-mile-an-hour sign, which just happens to be outside my house, so I have local knowledge. And coming into Blythe, there is an interactive sign which gives you the speed. The 20-mile-an-hour is advisory outside school hours. I tell you now that most people just ignore it. There is, because we've asked them and they've applied, there has been several speed traps held underneath the bridge. I gather they've caught quite a few people, and that's quieted it down. But generally speaking, they don't work.
Is the interactive sign trying to manage traffic to 30 miles an hour?
Just trying to get it back to 30 miles an hour.
I have one other question, if I may, Chairman, and that was about the survey that was undertaken over the weekend in Blythe Village.
Yeah.
And now there was reference to, I think, 70% of people being against the development. I was just wondering whether that was specifically against the development or just against fracking generally.
Sorry if I confused you. The survey in Blythe was actually done about 4 months ago, where we knocked on everybody's door, and 70% was against the Tinker Lane development. We were talking about Tinker Lane. The Saturday thing, whilst it was about Tinker Lane, was a frack-free Nottingham event, which I just went and thought, okay, I'll see what it's like, and was extremely successful. And so I'd be hard put to say it wasn't just against fracking, but a number of people came up to me and said, oh, I live down there, is that going to be? And so it related directly to it as well, a bit of both on Saturday, but the 70% was definitely Tinker Lane.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Thompson. Any other questions? Thank you. Mr Meek, you seem to be having some kind of dichotomy of view as to what has or has not been counted. I wonder if you could help us in responding to Mr Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the cumulative impacts table, which is on pages 268 and 269 of the committee report, or for those that don't have a numbered page numbered committee report, it's just below paragraph 998. That table sets out the other development which could be considered reasonably foreseeable, with which we have considered various potential cumulative impacts, one of which traffic is one of which. You'll see that the Thievesdale Lane development is included within that list. On top of that, as was previously discussed and questions were asked about it following my presentation, I'll refer again to the paragraph 487 of the committee report, which highlights that in consultation with Highways England and the Highways, NCC Highways, they've considered the development from a cumulative impact perspective, with particular reference to the large-scale industrial development in Harlow, and no concerns about the capacity of the road network are raised. I think it's also quite important to talk about the committee report, which was a quote from which was referenced within the presentation, and that was for the Thievesdale Lane development, and a quote from an NCC Highways officer was included within that. I think the first thing to mention is that whilst the Thievesdale Lane development has been through committee, planning permission hasn't been issued yet. It's subject to a Section 106 agreement, which is currently being negotiated. So no decision notice on that has actually been issued yet. The quote referenced concerns an outline planning application for 182 houses and employment use. to the north of Thievesdale Lane and west of Blythe Road in Worksop. And just putting the quote into context, they form part of the Highways Authority's, NCC Highways Authority's response to that planning application. And it specifically concerns the junction impact assessment of the B6045 and the A643 junction at High Street within Blythe. And the individual quote forms part of a more expansive response from the Highways Authority, which I'd just like to read out now. It says, at present, right turners from High Street block straight ahead movements whilst waiting for a gap in traffic heading north from Spittal Road. Without an improvement at this location, future traffic growth will result in significant numbers of vehicles queuing back along High Street from Worksop Road to the point where they will block the Retford Road mini roundabout junction and beyond. This will severely restrict the movement of traffic within Blythe. It is predicted that this point will be reached around the year 2022, with the addition of this development, assuming traffic growth is living. Some form of traffic mitigation scheme is therefore required to launch towards the later stages of this development. To avoid encroaching onto the village green, it is recommended that a Ghost Island right turn lane be provided on High Street, such that a right turning vehicle does not block ahead movements. This will require the widening of the Worksop Road arm of the priority junction to ease turning movements, such that they can take place outside the area to be marked out for right turners. Considering the traffic distributions associated with both the employment and residential aspects of the site, it is considered that only the employment element of the site will create a detrimental impact associated with the junction, and as such, a suitable condition is proposed to assign a trigger for the implementation of the improvements solely relating to the employment land use. So, just from that, I'd like to highlight the point at which NCC is concerned about is around the year 2022, which is after the completion of the Tinker Lane development, and secondly, that is without mitigation. NCC Highways has suggested mitigation potential which would avoid encroaching on the village green, and that recommendation was included as a condition by Bassetlaw District Council in the recommendation to their councillors, which was approved. And on top of that, we are still yet to see a final decision notice because Section 106 is still being negotiated. That was the Thievesdale Lane matter. I think there was a point about the Breakfast Club and other hours. I just wanted to highlight that the applicant has sought to avoid the peak hours of movements when children would be dropped off and picked up at school. They are not looking to avoid all hours at which there may be some children dropped off or picked up at school, which could happen throughout the school day. So what they're looking to do is avoid the peak hours, which are between 8 and 9 and 3 and 4. I think that's all I've got to say on the matter.
Just on that, Mr. Meek, you talk about the peak hours. We are assuming that they are the peak hours on the basis of that as the time that the normal school day starts and ends. Do we have definitive evidence that perhaps these preschool, not the preschool itself, talking about the preschool activity and the post-school activity are not so popular that is a misnomer in terms of those being the peak hours, and that the fact they may be slightly later or earlier?
Yes, Chair. Regarding the preschool on the main road, it offers care for 2.5 to 5-year-olds between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. and 12:50 and 3:50 p.m. According to the latest Ofsted report, it has 11 places and 19 pupils on the roll, which is compared to the 121 pupils at the full-time primary school.
Forgive me, in a sense it's my misuse of the word preschool. I wasn't referring to the preschool as an operation. I was talking about at the school where there are activities before the start of the school day, be it a breakfast club or something like that, and also after school. All I'm trying to ascertain is that the assumption that the peak hours are those related to the school activities in its normal state. Are we absolutely sure that they are indeed the peak hours, and that because of the extracurricular activities at the beginning and the end of the school day, that might not quite be the peak hours? That's all I'm referring to.
Of course. What we have considered, we've looked at the school start time and the school finish time. We haven't looked at the popularity of extracurricular activities.
Councillor Drosney.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I know it's inappropriate to jump back in, but surely it's not beyond the wit of the planning committee to just ask them to extend that condition by 30 minutes either way. That would alleviate all of that particular concern, which is a large one for such a small village, I think. So ask them for half an hour extra earlier and half an hour extra at the end, and amend that condition.
As you know, Councillor Drosney, there's probably no end or bound to the wit of this committee. And no doubt, during the long process of the day, that may well come forth as a suggestion. With that, I thank you once again, Mr. Thompson, for your contribution. And our next contributor is, I think, Christy Willis. Ms. Willis, I understand you are afflicted with some kind of cough.
Yes, sorry, I have a chest infection, so if I cough up a lung, excuse me.
No. All I wish to point out, this is not something we normally offer, but my colleague to my immediate left will take true cognizance of your position with
Thank
regards
you.
to the 10 minutes you have. Begin at your leisure, please.
Thank you, I'll wait till then. Thank you. So one of our primary concerns is regarding subsidence in this area of Bassetlaw, which is completely riddled with underground coal mining works from the Harworth Colliery. Our local village of Torworth is situated less than a mile away from the proposed development site of Tinker Lane and retains a mixture of collapsed, partially collapsed, and open workings with mining roadways underneath. These underground works continue to be a threat in terms of future subsidence and potentially for collapse. Their nearby villages of Ramskill and Blythe have already experienced earthquakes, one of which, I quote, had people running from their houses. According to the British Geological Society, this area suffers from frequent but minor earthquakes, and some of our local buildings already have subsidence issues. Years ago in Ramskill, a sinkhole also opened up in a street. Our point is that this is a coalfield area already unstable from previous mine workings, with a documented history of earth tremors and sinkholes. The last thing we need is to add deep drilling into this mix. At one of our CLG meetings last year, Community Liaison Groups, iGas's own geologist talked with us. From her presentation, I extracted the following quotes. The Tinker Lane site sits very close to mines, I won't deny that. About half of the boreholes in the area show evidence of faulting. There is faulting in coal, it is very prevalent. Coal is a very soft material which fractures and faults very easily, so it is not a surprise to see evidence of faulting or fault-related features within these boreholes. In 1990, Al Fraser published a series of peer-reviewed papers on behalf of BP. In his publications, Fraser included maps showing the locations of faults in this area, one of which is a fault going straight through the Tinker Lane site. iGas's own 2D data, shot in the 1980s, does not show this fault. While iGas acknowledges Al Fraser as an expert in his field, they reject his work and instead rely on their own aged data for interpretation, which has not been made public as it is deemed to be commercially sensitive. Therefore, the location, depth, and direction of the faults in and around the Tinker Lane site are iGas's best guess using very old data. We have always been extremely concerned about the lack of 3D seismic surveying at Tinker Lane. It is a powerful geophysical tool used to profile the different soil horizons at great depths. Most importantly, it uses non-invasive techniques to gather its data and will pinpoint all faults in the area. We remain perplexed as to why IGAS refused to conduct 3D seismic surveying, since one of their objectives for inputting a well, at least according to their planning application, is in order for them to gather more geological data. Even IGAS's own geologist agreed that the more data you have, the better the interpretation. So while this has been discussed previously, I'm bringing it up yet again. Another one of our concerns is the cumulative effects traffic will have from other large local developments, as these need to be taken into consideration when looking at traffic increases, road safety, and the impact on the daily lives of our residents. The main roads are, from left to right, the A1, the A634, which joins Barnby Moor to Blythe, and the A638, otherwise known as the Great North Road. The developments I'm about to show you range from minor to major, but together they impact our communities primarily through the substantial increase of traffic from construction, commercial, and new residents. So in Ramskill, planning permission has been given for 10 dwellings at Folly McLean and another 23 houses at Arundel Drive. Planning is also being sought for the erection of 130 houses along the Great North Road. In Torworth, planning permission has been granted for 3 barn conversions along the Great North Road. A quarry between the villages of Barnby Moor and Torworth is being submitted to Nottinghamshire County Council. This proposed development will see a further 150 HGVs on the Great North Road every day, equating to about 55,000 HGVs per year for at least 5 years. The other proposed quarry at Botany Bay, on the other side of Barnby Moor, again using the Great North Road, will see an average 160 HGVs per day, or about 58,500 per year for 15 years. Planning permission in Barnby Moor for the construction of 40 new homes is being applied for along the Great North Road. Also, Barnby Moor is seeing a planning application for a crematorium just south of the Tinker Lane site, and a solar farm is being built a few fields east of the site. Blythe, as we already discussed, is seeing a wealth of applications being approved. There are 2 large industrial developments north of the village, and the Thievesdale Lane residential industrial project, which will potentially create 160 houses. Added to all of this is the approved expansion 5 miles away in Redford, whereby another large industrial estate, hotel, and 196 houses has been approved along the Great North Road. While I acknowledge that some of the developments I have mentioned have gone through planning after IGAS have put in their own application, there is still their incomplete traffic modelling which must be addressed, especially in and around Blythe. Blythe already experiences repeated traffic problems, and it is only expected to get worse as all these developments go ahead. The total number of IGAS vehicles is estimated to be over 15,500 for the Tinker Lane site. However, when combined with all of the other traffic from the surrounding developments, this makes traffic numbers in our area completely unmanageable. What is not apparent from aerial photographs, but is very clear while driving on the A634, is the blind bend, highlighted there in red. This bend is situated on a slight incline with no clear view to oncoming traffic for either direction. The site entrance is not visible until you have almost passed it. Here's another area view, again showing the blind bend. And this photo is taken right next to the site entrance, again looking down the road at the blind bend. Not really clear. As you continue on the A634 towards Blythe and past the bend, a large triangular shaped verge appears on the right-hand side, intersected by Billy Button Lane. Late last summer, a speeding car lost control, then followed the trajectory of that red area before taking out the mature hedgerow at the bottom. That's the car, and that's the car again. The car was completely written off. Now, several issues concern us here. Firstly, there is no speed reduction at this bend, despite us asking highways to implement one. And secondly, the only real area for protesters, supporters, police, reporters, or member of the public to step, is on this large verge. We've already had accidents caused by speeding vehicles. We certainly don't want to see anyone hurt should it happen again. Another one of our concerns is the frequent episodes of sheep escaping onto the busy A634. These sheep that we see here in the picture were chased off the main road and down Billy Button Lane by passing motorists, meaning not only did the sheep cause problems, but so too did parked cars trying to help. In addition to the sheep, are very regular authorized and unauthorized cycle races. Pacer cars, cyclists, spectators, parked cars, and continuous traffic movements all present a hazard, not only on this fast road, but also as obstacles on the blind bend. And those two photographs are in Torworth itself. So another point that I wish to raise is that of our disappointment and frustration regarding the erection of the security cabins at this site in October 2015 without planning permission, and the failure of Bassetlaw District Council to act despite 8 months of continuous objections by us and by local residents. This issue has not only instilled distrust in IGAS at a very early stage, but there's now also a lack of confidence that any potential future infringement will be adequately and swiftly dealt with by the regulating authorities.
1 minute.
Thank you. In closing, I would like to stress just how much the community does not want this development. Our concerns regarding previous mining activity, fault locations, subsidence, and the lack of 3D seismic surveying are very real. Cumulative traffic problems due to other developments in the area and fast speed limits on a blind bend make us as parish councillors anxious and us as residents fearful. In terms of the porta cabins, IGAS has already proven that they will infringe on regulations if it suits their purpose, with little regard to any rules. How can we find IGAS to be trustworthy? And finally, why does IGAS need another exploratory well when they've already been given planning approval for a well 5 miles away at Mizzen Springs? I propose that the best option would be to use Mizzen as a test site. This way we can scrutinize IGAS on the procedures and protocols and allow the public time to experience shale gas, shale gas exploration and decide if this is something that would benefit their communities. It would also allow IGAS time to fix relationships within the Tinker Lane area and prove that they are willing to work with us. Thank you.
Thank you. A valiant effort and one very successful. Okay, again, do we have questions for Willis? No? If I may, I'm intrigued by the ending of your presentation. Are you suggesting that in a different world, whereby, as you point out, Mizzen Spring is to be used as the template for the future and the template upon which we can judge the company and its operation, that would overcome your objections so powerfully outlined earlier?
I don't think it would overcome all of our points because the points regarding mining and traffic are still very real, and I guess that's just development in general. But it would allow IGAS time, and especially our community's time, because there's so many questions that are still needing to be asked about this type of mining activity and the distrust that our communities have within this area. And it would just allow IGAS the time to prove that they're a reliable company. The fact that they have illegal porta cabins on this site, that it's been tied up with legal and Bassetlaw District Council. It just shows that they're at a very early stage, they were flaunting regulations. So this, by allowing Mizzen Springs to go ahead, we can watch them, we can monitor them, see if they're following the rules, and perhaps then we, show that they can work with us regarding a potential site here. But again, the mining and the traffic will still need to be addressed in the long term.
One final point, forgive me for almost But I think it is incumbent on those opposing this application to come up with an answer that is constantly going to be put back to you about this is but a temporary development. Give the committee, if you a real reason to respond to that problem.
It may be a temporary development for this application. However, we still have strong concerns regarding the mining that is underneath Torworth and the surrounding areas. You know, you're drilling down very, very deeply. There are published faults going through the Tinker Lane site. You know, what would happen if the drill was to hit that fault? We have collapsed, partially collapsed, and open mine works. You know, will it trigger a chain reaction and cause further subsidence issues in and around us, considering that we already have documented history of earth tremors and sinkholes in the area. But not only that, is that the daily impact that traffic is going to have on the lives of our residents, coupled with the other developments in the area, just means that, you know, for example, the 6, 7, 8 weeks that the main traffic is going to be running in at Tinker Lane during the construction phase, just means that it's just adding to the daily misery of commuting to and from work, getting our kids to schools and their afternoon activities, because of all of the other surrounding developments that are happening. I mean, if this was to go ahead and be approved, there's no saying that IGAS is going to go tomorrow and start constructing. It could be months down the line, it could be a year or two down the line, and all of these developments need to be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any more questions? Mr. Meek.
Thank you. I don't intend to dwell on the cumulative traffic impacts, as we've covered that quite, and the County Council's position on that quite substantially over previous questioning. But I would just like to highlight, I think the first slide did make reference to a horizontal well. This is a vertical well only. There would be no horizontal well as part of this application. With reference to the historic and existing mines, we've seen some mapping and there are historic mines in the area, but they've been confirmed that recorded mining is approximately 930 metres away from the site. We've consulted with the Coal Authority, who don't have an objection, and also Health and Safety Executive, who again regulates the borehole and regulates it in relation to historic mining. So we are satisfied from a planning perspective that the principle of development is acceptable with regard to historic mining in the local area. On the 3D seismic survey point, I just draw attention to paragraph 835 of the committee report, which makes reference to the planning practice guidance, which states it is a matter for individual operators to determine how much preliminary data is necessary before undertaking exploratory drilling. So there isn't a requirement for it, and that's set out in planning practice guidance. The other thing I wanted to mention was in relation to the site access and the bend in the road. The site access has been considered by the NCC Highways team. They want to make sure that there are visibility displays in place so that vehicles leaving the site can suitably see up and down the road. What they require is visibility displays of 250 metres in each direction, and there is a condition attached to ensure that is in place in line with their recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Councillor Sutherland, did you have a point?
Thank you. To Oliver, actually. Clearly, from what we've heard, Oliver, it's very clear to me that the residents of these surrounding villages do not have the confidence of IGAS, any confidence in IGAS. Now, whether this is right or wrong is up to them. But if I was doing something, I thought that I needed to get and gain the residents' confidence, I would actually go to the further mile, and I would do the seismic surveys, because by doing them and proving that it was fine and safe, then it might gain the trust from the residents. So my question is, it may be plan and practice guidance, but if I was a resident up there, I wouldn't give a jot about that. I would be more concerned that when they started to drill, my house was not going to be affected. And from a personal point of view, would you not agree with me that one way to gain the residents' confidence in this company, which clearly they don't have, would have been to have said, yes, okay, we'll do some seismic surveys, whether or not it's planning guidance, whether or not they should do it, because at the end of the day, they have got to work with these residents. And we have a situation which is becoming very, very clear, that we have IGAS on one side, the residents on the other, and there's an impasse. However you look at it, there's an impasse. And I would have thought if they had not taken any notice of planning guidance, but just said, okay, we do have a problem, we will do some seismic surveys, we will give you the confidence that what we plan to do is going to be safe. Would you not have agreed that this might have been the way forward?
Thank you, Councillor Saddington. As a planning officer, I do have to take notice of planning guidance, and there is not a planning justification for requiring seismic surveys. In terms of confidence, I suggest that those questions are directed towards IGAS, because I can't speak on their behalf.
Okay, I shall keep it for
Thank you indeed, Mr. Meek. Thank you, Ms. Willis, for your presentation. We are now, I feel, presented with our final presentation against this application. We have the benefit of two people, Rachel and Stephen Kitchen. I don't know whether they're going to take this in singles, or it is going to be a joint effort. Are you both going to speak?
I'm speaking.
You're speaking. Okay. Then the entire 10 minutes, and because I'm that kind of fellow, I notice these things. You therefore must be Rachel rather than Stephen. Rachel Kitchen, you have your 10 minutes all to yourself at your leisure.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Rachel Kitchen. I grew up on Mantles Farm, Blythe, which is part of Mansfield Farms Limited, and which is near to the Tinker Lane site. My family has farmed here for over 80 years. My little 3-year-old daughter, Nina, recently started at Blythe Preschool. On first hearing of the exploratory well, I was very concerned it could affect my little daughter, Nina, and other children in the area, as well as farming and our local rural economy. So I started an online petition. About 3,000 signed in 1 month. Sally Gill of Nottinghamshire County Council kindly allowed us to present it to her at County Hall. This slide shows us presenting our petition to Sally. The site is on the A634 between Barney-Moore and Blythe. It is in a greenfield area and definitely not brownfield. At the site entrance, the road is about 18 feet wide with a national speed limit of 60 miles per hour. One of the Bassett Law District Council's reasons to recommend that this application should be turned down is that cyclists regularly use this stretch of road for races, time trials and training, which can involve groups of up to 40 to 50 at a time. The site entrance is on a stretch of road which has sharpish bends at both ends, leaving the site entrance to be largely unsighted from both directions. Looking at this slide, as you follow the road round from Blythe, one of the bends can easily be seen. It is too dreadful to contemplate what would happen if cyclists or fast cars come to that. Suddenly confronted a 54-foot long road tanker negotiating the 18-foot wide road outside the site entrance. Looking into the future, this is an artist's impression of what the drilling rig would look like. I've divided my talk into two parts. Firstly, the increase in heavy traffic and the risk to local school children. And secondly, about the possible effects on local farming and the rural economy. So starting with part one, which deals with traffic and school children. This slide shows Blythe Primary School and Blythe Preschool and the intended routes for heavy goods vehicles from site to the A1. This is a diagram of a typical road tanker taken from the applicant's website. It is 54 feet long, 8 feet 6 inches wide and 12 feet high. This slide shows Blythe Primary School. This is the crossing outside the school entrance. It is about 10 feet wide either side of a 3 feet wide bollard with no drop curves. Which leaves about 8 inches between wheels and curb. Would you like your child to cross here to go to a soon-to-be introduced breakfast club or an after-school club? This slide shows Blythe Preschool, which is held from 9 to 12 noon every day. Sorry, parents waiting for Blythe Primary School to finish. This slide shows Blythe Preschool, which is held from 9 to 12 noon every day. Large lorries passing in front of Blythe Preschool. My main concern is that an increase in large road tankers will pose an increased road safety risk as well as an increased health risk from diesel emissions to children from both schools. Now on to part two, which deals with farming and the rural economy. This slide shows our family farm. We live in a highly productive area. As already said, it is in a greenfield area and definitely not brownfield. Most crop yields are at the top end of the national average, with some being higher, such as potatoes, indicating a good depth of workable soil. Ransfield Farms Limited is a very successful and well-organised agricultural business. Indirectly, we use the services of many agricultural suppliers, and higher up the food chain, we supply many food manufacturers. We need to produce high-quality produce for their financial viability. This slide shows some of our local crops: wheat, barley, and vining peas. More local crops: potatoes, carrots, sugar beets, and oilseed rape. As a successful farming business, we strive to produce good, wholesome food of the highest quality, as shown by this slide. The British public only deserve the very best, and this is our mission, as it will be for all the other farms in the area. Without producing the highest quality food, we would certainly go out of business, pure and simple. This slide shows potatoes being irrigated. Irrigation is essential to ensure high-yielding crops. Concerns about drilling, exploratory and monitoring wells centre around the possibility of contamination of the underlying aquifer from which we draw our water for irrigation. Of concern is the possible release of toxic materials such as lead and chromium, as well as the radioactive substances. Another concern is the use of oil-based bentonite, mud lubricants, and the subsequent release it is inevitable that any dust created will settle on our land. This could lead buyers not wanting to purchase local produce because of the risk that our crops will have been contaminated by such dust, as well as by contaminated irrigation water, which wouldn't project the right image. Drop in the water table. As drilling of the exploratory wells is quite water intensive and is taken from the underlying aquifer, it could mean that there could be a depletion of water, especially if we have a dry summer. This in turn could lead to a drop in the water table and the reduction of water available for crop growth, as well as for irrigation. Such could then result in reduced crop yields, as well as poorer quality at harvest time. Such problems involving concerns about irrigation, dust and possible drop in the water table could all affect the financial viability of the business, either as a perceived risk or a real risk. In turn could lead to reduced employment. In deciding not to grant this application, we trust that you will be able to include the possible risks to our local school children, to our local farming, and to the many cyclists who use the A634 between Blythe and Barnby Moor. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Kitchen. 5 hours in, and showing us a life-size picture of a foaming pint of beer made in Tanzania. Cruelty, but nevertheless, your point is well made. Do we have any colleagues who wish to ask Ms. Kitchen any questions? I beg your pardon. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's one for yourself and possibly one for Oliver as well. Do we know what grade of agricultural land the site is on?
It's grade 1.
Grade 1.
It's about grade 2 to grade 3.
The second question is to Oliver. It's my understanding that the National Planning Policy, Framework Policy, that they're against building on brownfield sites, especially on grade 1 agricultural or grade 2 agricultural land. Has that been thought of?
I'm sure Mr. Mead will return to that point, but let me see if there are any more questions there. Any more questions for our guests? Councillor Hempstead.
Yeah, I'm interested that a new factor has been introduced here. Well, 2 new factors actually. The cyclists who use the road. But my main focus of attention now is on the impact on local farming. The issue of the water table was raised, and the issue of dust contamination of the crops. And so perhaps we can ask Mr. Luke to comment particularly on those issues and what consideration has been given to the impact on the local farming.
Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Mead, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, safety is a very important matter, and that is part of our considerations as part of this planning application. We've looked at the safety of the access and considered the need for a suitable visibility space and to be progress. We've also considered the safety. We've looked at accident records along the proposed vehicle routing, the vehicle routes. No safety issues were raised by our highways team, who consider safety as part of their highway guidance, and that's taking into account the number of vehicles and the size of vehicles and the roads that they would pass along. So given that isn't an issue that they deem to be a concern, it's not something that we think is sufficient to warrant the refusal of this application. Diesel emissions from vehicles is something that was mentioned. The applicant's assessment has considered emissions from traffic, they've assessed it at a series of different receptors along the proposed vehicle route heading into Blythe and heading north and south. And the emissions, existing emissions levels with the additional emissions from the traffic proposed, there will be not a significant impact from the proposed traffic, and it would be below all air quality objective threshold levels at all of the receptors. Irrigation and farming and the water impact. It's something we have touched on already, and it's about the design of the well pad is such that any accidental spillages would be collected and taken away from the site. So there is designed-in mitigation as part of the development. In terms of the drilling itself, again, I made reference to the Environment Agency's environmental permit and their assessment of the drilling, and that they are of the view that the impacts would be any release would be of quantity and concentration so small as to obviate any impacts on groundwater quality. So we have considered the wider impact of groundwater in the area and its use for irrigation and farming, and that's not something that we raises concerns from the planning point of view for us. In terms of air quality in farming, within the application has been consideration given to certainly to air quality on local wildlife sites, and there's been quite a detailed assessment of the emissions from the development and traffic on the Tinker Lane wildlife site, which is 200 metres or so away from the planning application site itself, and that's been assessed as not having an acceptable impact. So given that there wouldn't be an unacceptable impact on a site, an ecological site that is so close to the application site, I think it's reasonable to see that there isn't going to be impacts to the wider farming area from emissions. In relation to dust, there could be some dust generation during the construction of the site and again during the restoration of the site. But we have mitigation measures, the applicant has proposed mitigation measures to minimise dust impacts, and there's a condition, condition 30 within the recommended conditions in Appendix 1, sets out the requirement for a construction phase dust management plan, which the applicant will have to submit and adhere to in their operations to mitigate wider dust impacts. With reference to the grade of agricultural land, the applicant has undertaken an agricultural land classification study, and it's identified that 54% of the land is within grade 3A, and the remainder of the site is within grade 3. Now, grade 3A land is classed as best and most versatile agricultural land, so it's high value agricultural land. So just over half of the site is high value agricultural land. In response to that, it's important to highlight that this is a temporary operation, and the site will be restored back to an agricultural use afterwards. And there's a condition requiring 5 years of aftercare management to ensure that it is brought back to its previous agricultural standard.
Thank you, Mr. Meakin. Just following on one point of your answer. It is right to assume, therefore, that the fear of a drop in the water table will have been addressed by the Environment Agency as well.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Allow me to return to your chairs. Oh, forgive me, I do make a problem. Council Assistant.
It's all right, Mr. Chairman. You asked the question I was going to ask about the dropping of the water table.
I sometimes astonish myself. Thank you very much, Ms. Kitchen. We now move to the first of two presentations by those wishing to support the application. And we begin, I believe, with Mr. Cronin. Mr. Cronin, you know the rules by now. And begin at your leisure.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you and the Council for allowing me to speak today. I'm Ken Cronin, the Chief Executive of the United Kingdom Onshore Oil and Gas, and representative body of the onshore oil and gas industry. We are fully funded by our members and are open to licence holders and supply chain companies. iGas is one of the longest established UK onshore oil and gas companies. It's also a key and founding member of the UK Mine Organisation. I'd like to briefly cover a number of topics. Firstly, why as an industry we need to explore for gas, and secondly, the regulatory system we work in and what I believe are the benefits. Today, over a third of our total energy comes from gas, including up to 45% of our electricity needs. 84% of our homes use gas for heating and 61% use gas for cooking. Around 500,000 jobs in this country depend on gas as a feedstock, and gas-based fertiliser is spread on around 75% of our farmland to grow food. Gas provides input to so many of our everyday products, including medications, cosmetics, toiletries, and even solar panels and wind turbines. The East Midlands currently accounts for about 9% of the UK's gas meters. That is some 1.8 million homes, with a relatively high gas consumption per household. In the local area to Tinker Lane, there are approximately 44,000 households with gas meters. However, we are increasingly dependent on imports, which have risen over the last 15 years by to nearly 50% of our consumption, costing around about £14 million a day, money that is not generating jobs or tax revenues in this country. The Oil and Gas Authority forecasts that dependency will rise to 80% in the next 18 years, and we estimate that could cost the UK economy about £9 billion a year. We also need to consider our energy security more generally. In 2015, the UK spent £14 billion on net primary fuel and energy imports. That's around about £500 per household. And that figure was over £20 billion in 2012 and 2013 when prices were much higher. Most forecasts of gas use remaining relatively constant for the next couple of decades, and depending on future solutions using decarbonised methane for heating, for example, our gas requirement could stretch into many, many decades to come. I believe that this country must redress the balance and start producing its own energy again in order to provide a more secure and independent future in charge of our own destiny. We know that in the geology beneath us there is a substantial amount of gas that could provide a source of supply for many decades, but we need to gather more information. That is fundamentally the project before you. As the GMB Union has pointed out, we need to honestly consider the moral and environmental issues about transporting gas across oceans and continents and being increasingly dependent on gas from countries with regulatory and environmental and human rights standards lower than our own. I believe our regulatory standards are very high. It is not a simple tick box exercise, and as in many countries. Rather, it takes us and looks at what all the risks are, the probability of any of them happening, what the physical pathway for that risk to travel could be, and how we reduce the risk. The four regulators each have a role to play: the Mineral Planning Authority with respect to local issues such as noise and transport, the Health and Safety Executive with respect to well integrity and compliance with borehole legislation, the Environment Agency with respect to air, soil and water, who issue up to 9 environmental permits connected to 17 EU directives, and finally the Oil and Gas Authority to ensure that the operator has the right operational and financial capacity. I know the documents you have go into some detail on the regulatory framework. For me, the important aspect is ensuring the well is designed, created and tested properly so there are no leaks in the surrounding groundwater. This is covered by an independent well examiner as well as the Health and Safety Executive. The chemicals used are appropriate and are stored on the surface in the correct manner as per the environmental permits, and proper consideration of the risks 2, a mitigation for any possible contamination to air, soil and water, including monitoring, has been completed. For all these activities, the work for this project has been completed and the Environment Agency have issued regulatory permits. Many of the fears come from stories from the US. Yes, there have been some isolated incidents, mainly down to the construction of the well itself, a combination of poor operatorship and historic poor regulation, neither of which apply in this country or to this project. Over the last few years, there have been several independent reports produced in the UK, including the Royal Society, the Royal Academy of Engineering and Public Health England. Coming from all of them are two clear messages. Firstly, it is wrong to assume that isolated incidents that occur in other countries can happen here under our regulatory regime. And secondly, in a properly regulated industry, the risks are minimal. In addition to my firm belief that we need to increase the proportion of homegrown energy, we also need to bring back jobs and investment into our sector, rather than paying somebody else to do it for us. In 2014, alongside government, my organisation commissioned a study to ascertain what the benefits could be with respect to supply chain and jobs. Top line, we believe we can make an investment over the next 15 years of approximately 33 billion, creating 64,000 jobs. But to do this, we must understand the geology beneath us, and that's why this project is so important. The UK has a long history of drilling onshore in the UK, having drilled over 2,000 wells, very similar to the one in consideration today. We have currently 120 production sites with approximately 230 operating wells. We produce 8 million barrels of oil equivalent per year. That's the equivalent of 1.1 million family cars, or just under 1 million homes in terms of heating. This area has a long history of safe oil and gas extraction. In total, we have drilled over 500 wells in the East Midlands, of which currently about 90 are currently producing. Our industry spend last year in the East Midlands was about 10 million. I'd like to see this increase as this region contributes to an increased production of our own energy, our own jobs and our own security. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. Do we have any questions, Mr. Cronin? Councillor Zabrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions. There was a phrase you used that alarmed me a little, because in its vagary, which were, the chemicals we use are appropriate. I literally have no idea what you mean by that. I mean, literally not. And I mean, I'd like you to tell me. I mean, give me a bookful if it's a bookful, or if it's, you know, a bit of salt, tell me, but don't use such vagaries with it. It's highly inappropriate for such a delicate matter. Please go into that. And then there was a little bit about jobs, which really interests me. It might be the only thing that might be a saving grace for any fracking operation, as far as I'm concerned. It's about jobs. And you said 64,000 jobs, potentially. And I recall Quadrilla saying something similar when they did the Lancashire application. And Lancashire is now subject to a full fracking, and it created 11 jobs. 11, not 64,000, not 64. Can you elaborate more on how this might economically benefit the East Midlands if it does have a negative impact on our rural economy, as we've heard it may do? I'd like to know the impact of wealth creation, which could be very important in terms of mitigating what we are concerned about.
Okay, so in terms of the chemicals we use are approved by the Environment Agency. They are approved as being non-hazardous to groundwater. That is part of the regulations. That's what I meant by appropriate. I'm not a technician, but the chemicals that I use are to make the process more efficient. And as I said, they are non-hazardous to groundwater. And you'll find many of them underneath your kitchen sink in the products that we use. In terms of the jobs, the oil and gas industry, in common with quite a few industries in the energy sector, actually has what's called a outsourced model. So there is actually there's not actually, there's quite a few jobs on the sites on an ongoing basis, but actually the jobs are created in the supply chain. So people that would supply sand, cement, that will make all of the equipment that we need. There will be people that man the drilling rigs, for example. So all of that comes into the 64,000. Those numbers have been developed by EY. They are based on real numbers both in this country and in the US and in Canada. And it was very much a bottom-up approach to how we get to those jobs. In a very similar way to wind farms, for example. Wind farms actually don't have physically a huge number of people on their sites, nor do solar farms, but they do have a huge number of people working within the supply chain. So that's how those numbers are created. And the report's on our website.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. The bit I'd like to go about, continue about jobs, because I think it's a vitally important part of this. As I say, if there's any redeeming feature of this, as far as I'm concerned, is it might have economic regenerative benefits. You said that there will be these figures are based on real numbers, on a number of studies. Do you, as chief executive, someone very high up in this field, have figures for this site? How many jobs on site and how many jobs in the supply chain for this site? It's great to talk countrywide, but we're unfortunately constrained to talk about Blyth, and happy I am at this time, because this means that I want to know what's happening in Blyth.
Yeah, you would have to ask IGAS that, which I'm sure you will do. The 64,000 jobs comes when you look at the full development of Shell in the UK, which was based on about 400 sites.
I have other speakers, but I want to follow on from Councillor Drosney's question, because you yourself used the phrase, talking in terms of employment, you used the phrase about the people manning the drilling well. So, quite simply, how many would that be? I don't want a global figure, like Councillor Drosney. On this site, this application, which all we're concerned with today, if you are aware that there was job creation by men, from what you were saying, dealing with this drilling well, how many would it be in this particular development?
As I said, that's something you would need to ask the applicant. I don't have those numbers in front of me, and it would be silly for me to make them up, so you'd have to ask your applicant.
With respect, I haven't offended, I would want you to appear silly, but you are an expert, sir. This is not a drill or drilling rig that is unknown to you. With your experience of the industry, how many people would you imagine would be required to tend this drill?
Okay, typically what you would find, depending on the drill, that the number of people on that crew can be somewhere between 20 and 50 working on that rig. But you would need to ask specifically, IGAS, in terms of the jobs.
I'm grateful. Councillor Heptonstall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for trying to bring this recent discussion back to this particular application. I want to say that all I've heard over the last 10 minutes has been completely irrelevant to this application. We treated to a treatise on the reason for gas production and the reason for fracking. And this application has got nothing to do with gas production and fracking. We as councillors on this planning committee have been advised that the only things that we can take into consideration in relation to this particular application are issues that relate to planning. not issues that relate to the environmental agency, not issues that relate to health and safety, not issues that relate to the reasons for wanting to move forward with gas exploration. And I have to commend everybody who has spoken so far today, all those who have spoken in opposition to this planning application, that none of them brought up the issue of being against fracking and using that as the reason for not passing this exploratory application. Nobody has done that. That wasn't the case in the last meeting that we had at Miston, where in fact we were as councillors, we were told that if we passed that application, we will be committing genocide. In this particular discussion, all the issues have been to do with planning and the merits of this application, this particular application. And what we've just heard is a treatise on the reasons for planning. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing you back to this particular application, because that's what's important. I'm not here, and I will not be voting on whether or not fracking is a good idea or not. I will be voting on the impact of this particular exploratory exercise in this particular location and the impact that will have on the local environment. That's what I'll be doing. And I have to say, I thought that your speech was totally inappropriate for this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think the points are extremely well made. I have to confess I might hear a question there. I'm sure that your point is well taken. Are there any other questions? Councillor Sissons.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to something that was mentioned at the end of the last speaker about the possible lowering of the water table, I just wondered, in your experience, where drills have been going through an aquifer, has it ever lowered the water table? And the other question, since it's been raised, the question of financial stability or viability, I know absolutely nothing about finance, I've got to say, but as it has been raised as a material consideration, I just wondered if you could comment on the notion that shares in iGas had dropped from, was it £1.40 down to 4p, and if that was because of a lack of confidence in iGas itself, or if you could offer just some explanation as to why that should happen, and if it has any bearing on this application.
With respect, Councillor, that may well be a question that one could direct at iGas, certainly the latter point. But I think you're absolutely right, in your right, to ask the question that you did about the aquifer.
In my experience and from the research that I have, there is no impact on the level of the aquifer. The water that is used for the process is tiny in comparison to what we actually use in the UK or on a regional basis, etc. So in my experience, there's no impact on the level of the water table.
Councillor Freeman? Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just a simple question. It goes along with what Councillor Epstein was actually saying. I mean, we've actually, congratulations on actually speaking, regardless of that, but we did hear almost exactly the same thing, apart from bringing the GMB into it from like the previous one, which was national. But I just wondered on your expertise, because we're asking you questions, and it's just for my clarification. Are you actually a qualified engineer, or are you just on the PR side of the company?
So I don't actually work for the company. I head up the trade association, which represents all of the companies within the UK, both the developers and also the supply chain. I've worked in the energy industry for about 25 years, predominantly on finance and communications.
Thank you. I have no more questions. My colleagues do not. Do you feel the need to comment, Mr. Mead? Then please do.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate some of the comments that have been already made by councillors, and that is that any benefits associated with extraction and production should not be attached to this development, as this is an exploration application area. We do have some figures on staff numbers. In paragraph, or just below paragraph 71 of the committee report, table 4 sets out staff numbers for the construction phase and for the drilling phase. During construction, there will be between 20 and 25 staff members on site, and during the drilling phase, there will be 25 to 30. Figures haven't been provided for the evaluation or restoration phase. In addition to that, there would be jobs in the supply chain and through haulage, although those figures haven't been provided as part of the planning application. In terms of the water level, I just want to highlight that there wouldn't be any kind of site abstraction from the water table as part of this planning application, and all of the water would be tankered in. All of the water to be used during drilling would be tankered in and stored on site, and those movements have been included as part of the traffic assessments. Thank you.
A valuable point, Mr. Mead. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cronin, for your answer. We have heard many responses that suggest that we ask IGAS that. Well, now is our opportunity. Well, we have I have two names again. Is it Mr. Lehmeyer and Mr. Herbert? Are we to be presented by yourself, Mr. Lehmeyer, or both?
I will present, yes, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Herbert, who is the Technical Director of the Planning Consultants, SLR, who did the work. So if we need any specific questions answering that pertain to that, he's available for.
Splendid. So he'll deal with the difficult questions.
Well, I will try and field them to begin with and then do my level best to pass them on.
Okay. Mr. Lehmeyer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'm John Laymart. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of IGAS. We're a British exploration and production company that operates solely onshore in the UK. I've been an oil and gas engineer for 34 years, both in the UK and internationally, and so I have extensive experience. I've worked at IGAS for the last 6 years, and I'm responsible for safe and environmentally sensitive conduct of our daily exploration and production activities, a role both I and the company take extremely seriously. Equally, we are extremely conscious of our role in the communities in which we operate. Reflecting this, at the start of this project, we initiated a community liaison group, a CLG, to provide a forum for discussion, dissemination of information, and the opportunity for us to listen to feedback from the local community. All parish councils local to the site are represented on the CLG, which first met in January 2016, and has since met 8 times. The group has discussed all aspects of the proposed development, including having outside speakers and presentations by various experts. In addition, we have organised site visits, newsletters, 2 project-specific public information days, presentations to parish councils and local interest groups, and set up a dedicated area for Tinker Lane on our Engage website. We've also visited people who live close to the development to answer any questions that they may have. Mr. Chairman, this area of England is no stranger to oil and gas exploration and production, with the first commercial onshore oil field going into production in Eakring in 1939. And a number of those fields we operate today were discovered in the 50s and 60s. IGAS's business has been operating assets in the wider East Midlands area for over 30 years, and roughly 50% of our total oil production comes from the area, some 1,200 barrels per day. We employ over 60 people locally, including apprentices, and we're keen to see that number rise. In 2015, our spend in the local economy was £7.5 million, and we're committed to working with local suppliers in all our operational areas. In 2016, iGas won a ROSPA President's Award for 10 consecutive years of gold standard health and safety. During all of that time, we've coexisted quietly, safely, and sensitively in local communities. Please let me reassure you that these same stringent principles that we've adhered to for decades will continue to apply to this project, which the planning officer has recommended for approval. The application before you is for permission to drill one vertical exploratory well. The proposed well is no different to the many wells already drilled in Nottinghamshire, albeit that this application is subject to the most comprehensive regulatory regime of any of its predecessors. Indeed, we've drilled 3 exploratory wells similar in nature to our application at Tinker Lane in the northwest, and did so without any adverse impact on the surrounding environment. All oil and gas wells are designed to rigorous standards to ensure that a high level of well integrity is provided. This is key to ensuring protection of the aquifer and groundwater, and is the most important element of the below ground activity. As part of the application, we're proposing to drill 3 sets of monitoring boreholes, each containing up to 3 boreholes, to monitor groundwater and ground gas before, during and after drilling of the exploration well. These results will be made publicly available. There have been a number of objections to the planning application, and I'd like to clarify a couple of important points surrounding those. Firstly, in respect to the security cameras that are erected, our legal advice indicated that we did not require planning consent for them. However, Bassett Law District Council decided the Plan Commission was required. To conform with the request from Bassett Law District Council, we agreed to include in this application a retrospective request for permission for the security cameras. I want to make it clear that we would rather not be in the position that we feel the need to erect temporary manned security cameras and fencing around our sites before they become operational. However, past experience has sadly put us in a position where we feel we need to bring in security measures to protect the site, the landowner, the local environment, and in some cases the local community. I can assure the committee that that is not a decision we take lightly. Concerns have been raised in relation to the proximity of our proposed operations to former coal mines and the need for 3D data. According to the records held by the Coal Authority, as well as our own exhaustive research and assessment of the available 2D seismic data, the site is not within the zone of likely physical influence on the surface from past underground workings, and that indeed the nearest historic workings are recorded as being 928 metres away from the site. The Coal Authority consultation response supports this conclusion. 2D seismic data is the standard method to safely position onshore wells from a geological perspective. Over 2,000 onshore wells have been safely drilled without causing any induced seismic activity using this method. Also, just to point out, every well drilled goes through an aquifer. Whether you are actually piling for buildings, putting in water wells and farms, drilling NCB boreholes, or in our case, drilling oil and gas wells, of which, as Mr. Cronin said, have been over 2,000 drilled to date. All of these go through the aquifer at some stage. However, of all of those boreholes I've just referred to, it's the oil and gas wells that are the most rigorous, regulated, and have the highest level of integrity in order to ensure that we protect the aquifer and the groundwater. I want to now address the issue of our financial stability and our ability or otherwise to fulfil our licence and planning obligations. Simply put, as your planning officer has noted in his report, iGas has significant cash resources, which amounts to some circa $31 million as at the end of February this year. Mr Chairman, in many respects, this application is no different to any other construction infrastructure project in respect of local concerns that need to be addressed and answered. We have voluntarily undertaken a full environmental impact assessment based on worst-case parameters, such as the drill rig height. We've drawn on the knowledge of technical experts to design a range of management measures to ensure that the development can proceed in an acceptable manner without detriment to the environment or local amenity. We've been extremely thorough in our preparation for this application, going beyond what is required of us from a statutory point of view and engaging with the community at every step of the process. This in particular is important to us as being an existing operator of over 90 operational wells. We understand how imperative it is to work in cooperation with local residents. At this stage, we, as well as other onshore operators around the country, are trying to establish if the potential shale gas resource that has been identified exists in the right formations and quantities to be commercially prospective and help to address the issues of security of supply. Mr Chairman, I would now like to direct members to the conclusions of the officer's report. It states that consideration has been given to impacts relating to traffic and transport, heritage, noise and vibration, ecology, lighting, visual impact, landscape character, ground and surface water, contamination, flood risk, air quality, rights of way, socio-economic impacts, public health, climate change and cumulative impacts. All have been assessed as being acceptable or as not being significant and outweighed by the great weight and support that is given to this type of development. The report adds that there is support for the principle of exploratory drilling in the Nottinghamshire Minerals Local Plan and emerging development. There is also considerable support for the development. Before the officer goes on to conclude that it is recommended that planning permission is granted. We support the officer's report before you today. It provides a very thorough account of the proposed development, a development which is purely for exploratory purposes and temporary in nature. It details the matters and issues raised through consultation and provides a reasoned balance of the planning issues. We recommend that members support their officer's recommendation and grant approval for this planning application for a vertical exploratory borehole. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Myers. Questions? Councillor Saddington.
Well, thank you for your brief on that. There's just one or two points I would like to ask you, and we know what's coming first, and that is you say that you have support for this application. Clearly you haven't got 100% support because there have been petitions and we have residents here today who have concerns. My question is, you are aware of these concerns, and as I said before when I was asking the officer why Notts County Council hadn't asked for a survey, a seismic survey, if you are doing some exploratory work, which you know you don't have the full cooperation from the residents because they are anxious, and if I lived there, I would be anxious too, then why didn't you go the extra mile to do the seismic surveys just to check and to ensure to the residents that they would be safe? Now you quote the Northwest. It doesn't matter about the Northwest. The fact is the mines were here, and so they are saying to you they are worried, and there is nothing to show that they have nothing to worry about. And so my question really is, when you knew they had a worry, you knew they had concerns, you knew you needed their support, just to have gone that extra mile, to have restored faith in the community, I think would have been a great plus for your company. Now the second thing, and I realise we've been here 6 hours, so I probably have not heard correctly, but the tour with Parish Councillor Miss Christy Willis, am I not correct that she referred to the local liaison committee as being dysfunctional? Was that what she said? Because you're saying that you have these meetings. I thought somewhere along the line I'd heard that not many people turn up or it's dysfunctional. But my request to you would be, if this application is successful from your point of view, that you reinstate this local liaison committee if it isn't doing quite what it ought to do, because I'm a member on several local liaison committees and I'm fully in support of them. I would suggest that you reinstate this mighty quickly and try and liaise with residents to try and get them on board with what you're doing. So it's two things. Is the local liaison committee actually functional? And secondly, because I thought I heard it wasn't, but I stand to be corrected, and why haven't you done the seismic surveys, which would have at least given some faith to these residents?
Thank you, Councillor. Let me try and answer the first one, and then let's come on and be a bit broader about the CLG aspects. In terms of doing whether or not a 3D seismic is necessary or not, we have multiple 2D lines. As I explained, the 2,000 wells that have been drilled to date onshore in the UK have all been drilled using 2D seismic data. 2D seismic data gives us sufficient to drill an exploratory borehole. If we were looking to develop the field, we would go ahead and shoot 3D seismic, because then you're talking about steering your wells in specific directions and specific orientations and targeting specific horizons. So you need a better quality of data for that. For the purposes of an exploratory borehole, all we need to do is to drill a vertical hole down, and bear in mind we're talking about an 8.5-inch hole here that we're talking about. That 8.5-inch hole goes down, and that's all we need to do is just drill it vertically. So we don't have to have a very, very detailed picture to do that. So that's principally why there is no need to do that. Now, in terms of the concerns that were raised, as I touched upon, were concerns about the proximity of coal mines and former mine workings. We've gone in with the Coal Authority, we've spoken to the former coal board, we have got copies and bought copies of the mine workings, and we put those and digitised those all, and we understand exactly where they are. Drilling a vertical hole that's almost a kilometre away from where they are will have absolutely no impact whatsoever. We have geologists, engineers, etc. I did a PhD in mining engineering, so I have a background in this and understand what may or may not occur. So there is absolutely no risk. The issue is, unfortunately, there's often a lack of understanding about the level of technology and understanding that we have. And that is the thing that we try through things like the community liaison group to actually help people to understand how well we understand what we're doing below the ground and what the measures are and what the rules and regulations are about it and how we determine what is sensible to do. So my bottom line to you is there is absolutely no need for a 3D seismic data to put this well in an appropriate location, safely and environmentally responsibly.
Okay, now the liaison.
The liaison committee, first of all, I reflect back to what you said to me. I agree with you entirely in the context of there are concerns, and there always will be into when we go into new communities. You know, we see this all the time. We're very cognizant of that, and we understand and respect that. I'd be absolutely amazed if we had 100% approval going into something like this, because there is a lot of, let me say, a lot of misinformation out there that is very easily accessible, and it's very difficult for us. Being blunt about it, we're talking here about, with all due respect to the communities, and there's an element of emotion here, whereas we tend to be very fact-based. You can't have a very effective conversation when one party is talking from a fact-based position, which we typically have to, versus the other party who sometimes is slightly more because they've picked up information that isn't necessarily valid. And what the difficulty we have is how to communicate that. We as an industry have been operating for, let's just say, since the Second World War, safely, environmentally responsibly, without any incident. But people don't know we're there. You can go a few miles down the road and there are oil fields there that have been there for 20 or 30 years, and people will deny they're there. I've been to village parish meetings where they deny that 5 miles down the road there's an oil field, because it just becomes part of that background. So if we can be accused of anything, we have failed to communicate effectively. But it has been not because necessarily we're poor communicators, it's just, it doesn't become real for people until it appears on their doorstep. And then it's something that's real, and that is something that causes concern. So we understand that. That's why we form CLG. That's why we try and engage. It varies from place to place. What gave me some reassurance today was the fact that, sadly at one level, but actually positively in another, it shows our openness and transparency that a lot of the people who were protesting today are members of the CLG. So we're not, we set the CLG up, but it was very much up to, and I hope that CLG members will accept this, that it was for them to guide how it was set up. It was the same with the Mizzen, with the Springs Road CLG, etc. They drive what they touch upon and what they see, and we try to support that, but we do not drive the CLG. That is up to the community liaison group to do that. In terms of it being dysfunctional, some of the comments that were made today actually upset me a little bit, because I know how hard our team works to try to support it. And to be fair, there is a slightly different tenor to the Tinker Lane one, let's say even to the Springs Road one, where in the 2 years that's been running, there were 24 meetings. We've struggled at times we've tried to organise meetings, there hasn't been necessarily the same level of appetite to do so. We understand entirely that there were concerns. I mean, for instance, there was something about the Environment Agency that led to a sense of mistrust. What happened there was we invited the Environment Agency to come along and speak to the CLG. The CLG members, which were perfectly in their right, invited members from the Springs Road one to come along. We advised, in the framework of open and transparency to the Environment Agency, that they were inviting people from the Springs Road. It wasn't to undermine it. Because the application was actually live with the Environment Agency at the time, the Environment Agency felt they didn't want to come into a public meeting, per se. So what they did, they said, right, we'll not attend that, but they then offered, subsequent to that, a regulators meeting where the Environment Agency, the Health and Safety Executive, etc., came along and did a presentation and made themselves available. So you can look at these things and you have to sort of sometimes look at the nuances of it. We would dearly like to be able to have a much better relationship. We do that with our other ones, and it varies. What we have found is that actually, contrary, and I understand, and I apologise to the members of the CLG if they don't feel they can trust us, and we'll come on to the other point, I'm sure, about the cabinet in a moment. But we are looking to work closely with them. We can take you to other locations where we operate, where we've applied for 2 wells to be drilled. It didn't even go to committee because the local village, which is in the South Downs National Park, it's Forestry Commission land, were perfectly comfortable because they trust us. They've known us for 10, 15 years and they know how we operate. We try to be transparent. What gave me some comfort was when the young lady who talk I thought was very good, but when she spoke about the geologists, our geologists saying, oh yes, more data, isn't it? They were being open and transparent, and they were being open with saying, yes, there are faults there, and there are. We are trying to be as open as we can in order to help people to understand how well we understand what we're doing, how we take necessary risk mitigation measures to make sure we do it safely and environmentally responsibly, and that we are open and transparent and willing to share. And it's only through that that you ultimately build that trust. And that is something that we value very much, because that's our reputation. I want to do a good job, but I also want to do it and actually be respected for it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Laymines, or the Dr. Laymines, as I feel.
Well, I don't play to that.
I've got members that have indicated we should speak. I just want to follow up on this one point. The point you raised about fact versus emotion, which makes it sound like eyeglasses from Mars and live residents on Venus. But I think the point. But the point I think you make is well made. And whether you call it emotion, whether you call it the fear of the unknown, whether you call it just natural doubts, I completely accept your faith in wanting to assure the local residents, work with the local residents. I have no doubt, I've heard you say this before, I didn't doubt it then, I don't doubt it now. Now, I'm an innocent fellow, I'm tutored in the harsh world of business and oil and gas, but I've also sat through what seems to me a perfectly sensible answer to your admitted problem. If it is a fear of the unknown, if it is a doubt about what the reality of an exploratory well is, as we've heard from, I think, Ms. Willis, if you are doing exactly this drilling less than 5 miles away, why not take up the option of just waiting? Showing the people of Blythe and wherever else you may want to do this in the locality, that through the example of what you have done at Missing Springs, there is no fear, there is no doubt, because you have proved everything that you said, everything you've hoped for, has been the case. Why not delay?
That's a fair question, and I think 2 answers to that. I would go, first of all, the previous 2,000 wells have demonstrated that. So where do you draw the line? Because they've been drilled safely, environmentally responsibly, of which 250 odd are producing today, safely without any issues, etc., etc. So at what point do you keep having to stop proving yourself? I'll answer that question before you ask me, in the sense you don't. You never stop proving yourself in reality. But the point I'm making is, at what point then do you also stop? There's another side to this, which is the anxiety that comes with it, because there is anxiety, there are concerns, and part of what we're trying to do here as well is actually to quickly get to the point of understanding. Because the key question we're faced with, as we said, we know the geology is there, we know it contains gas. The big question mark is, will it ultimately flow at rates that are commercial? Because if it doesn't, all bets are off, you walk away. The issue about drawing out this period of uncertainty, etc., it just starts to feed on itself, and it creates more tension and more anxiety and more stress than is actually necessary. And by understanding, relatively speaking, quickly, and I use that phrase advisedly, whether or not there is potential, one single well isn't going to address the question. And that's why we're trying to frame what's it like in that part of it, and then what's it like over here. And by doing that and trying to get through that process as quickly as possible is actually the best way of ameliorating a lot of the tensions and stresses and anxieties that come about because of that word uncertainty. So I could also make arguments about actually it's much more efficient to do them and actually get through that and address. But the fundamental one is the quicker we can get to an answer as to whether or not this works, the quicker then actually we'll be able to talk. Either that's it, we're not doing any more because there's no point in spending the money anymore, or this is what a development looks like. Because at the moment that's also a frustration because people are worried that we're going to industrialise the countryside. One, we would never want to do that. 2, you would never allow us to do that. 3, we don't need to do that. But it's very difficult to talk about that until we've got through this first stage. And that's why we're keen to try and move this forward as quickly as possible. Let's get this process has been going on now for over a year. During that time, all of this tension, stress, anxiety builds up. By addressing it and moving on quickly, I think we can alleviate a lot of that and also demonstrate behind what we've already done elsewhere, demonstrated here as well, to the satisfaction, I hope, and to the, perhaps, I say genuinely, to the surprise of some of the people who are more concerned about the way we operate and how we function.
Thank you. Councillor Beamer, I delayed your question, sorry. No, it's all right, you've added to it, it's almost right. Just before I do ask my question,
perhaps if we do get past stage 1 and stage 2 and you do find the gas flow is adequate and you want to develop it, perhaps the chairman's suggestion of actually taking people around and seeing how it's been done before and successfully might be extremely useful. But just going back to my question, is a lot of people have been on about the traffic problems, the flow of traffic, and the community, it's a horrible word, I can't say it, so there we go. The amount of traffic that's actually going to be flowing, but they're actually getting dates mixed up when it's going to come in with that. Could you help that situation by having a guesstimate? Because it is up to you when you start the site. Have you got any idea if you get planning permission when you'll be starting the site? Because that would alleviate some of the worries as well, especially concerning traffic.
Yes. Forgive me, Councillor Creamer, just for a second, because you actually touched on something I did want to add to your first point before you asked the question.
The first point for asking is if you do get to the stage 2, if there is a gas flow that's commercial.
No, sorry, perhaps you said something about, forgive me, you said something, I was going to give you a response to that. In terms of the traffic, in terms of start of operations, we don't want to be presumptive about the outcome of this meeting, but hypothetically, if it was to be approved, then what we would be looking to do is to move it forward as reasonably quickly as possible. We need to make sure that we complete obviously all the conditions prior to starting construction work, but we would hope to be looking at somewhere towards the end of the year, and that would be an ideal situation.
Councillor Heatherstone?
The first comment that I made when I first opened my mouth during this committee meeting was in relation to the cabins that were put on the sites very early on in the process, for which planning permission was not sought or obtained. And I want to return to that now. What I want to say is that if I want to build a small extension to my house, I know, not because I'm a councillor, just because I'm a human being, I know that there are planning conditions that need to be fulfilled. And I will make inquiries about that. But we have a situation here where buildings will be erected out in the open countryside. Apparently, having obtained legal advice in order to provide security that I'm sure is needed on the site. I find that absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Anybody building anything anywhere needs to get, as my understanding of it is, needs to get planning permission. And these buildings were put up very early on without planning permission. And I understand that that is now retrospectively put form in this application. But the reason that I want to dwell on this is because if this application is passed today, there will be all kinds of planning conditions that will be applied to the granting of the planning permission. And we want assurance, local residents want assurance that those various conditions which have been put in place for very good reasons will be adhered to. And because we've seen one instance of it going wrong, we feel, I think, that there's the possibility that it can go wrong again. You know, that something could happen, whether it's too much noise or too much light or, I don't know, lorries being sent from the site during school, you know, intake or exit. You know, something could go wrong again. We just fear that there's the possibility that the company will not pay as much regard to the conditions that have been applied to the granting of the planning permission that we would like to see. What's your reaction to that?
First of all, an understandable question. Accept that. Secondly, let me absolutely categorically, we do not, never have, never would, go down and do anything that we believe to be illegal. So when we step back, why did we put those cabins on there? I may well, we need to go into a lot more detail about this, call upon Chris to talk about some of the planning aspects of it. But in simple terms, with the identification of a site, there is a long, sadly, history of people then occupying sites. And one of the difficulties then is you start to run into a raft of issues that start to come from that. So that was the idea behind putting on board, on that site, security. There was no operations going on, etc. They were of temporary nature that could be lifted off. And in accordance with our understanding, because I completely take your point, if you're putting in something permanent, or building something, of course you have to go through the planning. So we went into that genuinely believing the situation to be that planning consent was not required for that. The issue was raised by someone, and then we then engaged with Bassetlaw District Council, and we all came to the conclusion that the idea was to, because we were in the process of submitting the application for this development, that would then become part of that. So that's the background to it. But let me take the next step. We operate over 100 sites. Each of those has both planning conditions, HSE requirements, environmental, all of them have at least 9 environmental permits. We are monitored and regulated and audited on these constantly. So every day we are complying with these. So I know again people have picked up on this. It was not a deliberate attempt in any way to do something illegal. As far as we understood, it was a legal way of going about ensuring that we could protect that site, the landowner, and the environment. And indeed, we've seen situations where local residents, but you tend to find you get activists coming from other areas that bring with them certain approaches to this that are not necessarily commensurate with the local community. And what we were looking to do was to make sure that we secured the site and provided that level of security. That's a reasonable, fair opinion to have, but that was genuinely why we approached it in that way.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about methane, and I'm wondering if you can give us a 100% assurance that there will be no methane leakage as a result of the exploratory drilling.
My simple, very quick and rather, dare I say, would be, yes, I can give you that. Let me add though, because I'm an engineer, I think any engineer worth his salt would never guarantee absolutely anything 100%. But this is about as 100% as you can possibly get. All we're doing is drilling, capturing rock from the bottom of between about 5,000 to 6,000 feet, 2,000 meters down, and we're not flowing anything back to surface, so there is no path for methane to come through. The short answer is yes, I can give you that answer.
Councillor Drosny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a comment and a quick question. I'm afraid I have to agree with the member of the audience who commented rather than the speaker about the temporary cabins. I'm afraid your answer, Dr. No Parsnips with me. You wondered earlier about trust issues with the local community and the CLG, then banged 2 containers on an area and pretend you didn't know that they needed planning application. Now, you're either in charge of 100 sites and know the ins and outs of planning law, or you don't. And if you're trying to inspire confidence of us, the cavalier attitude and the flagrant disregard of the planning law does nothing to inspire confidence.
That's your opinion of it as well.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. Excuse me. Yes, thank you. I'll speak, you can answer. That's how this works. And again, demonstrates that you don't really understand planning. I'm about to vote on your application. Annoying me at this stage isn't a good idea, I don't think.
Councillor Johnson, just continue with your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk about the finances, which you skipped over merrily, about how the company's still worth $31 million. But